But we start tonight with that news that a soldier from the Royal Anglian regiment has been killed in Afghanistan.
The total number of British soldiers to die in Afghanistan this year is now 100. Our chief reporter Kim Riley is in our newsroom. Kim.
Stuart, we have some pretty basic information. We know that the soldier is from the 1st Battalion of the Royal Anglians. He was actually killed as a result of small arms fire in an area known as Nad-e-Ali. That's an area in the central Helmand province. A spokesman for Task Force Helmand, Lieutenant Colonel David Wakefield, said the soldier, who hasn't yet been named incidentally, was one of us, one of our fellow soldiers, and we will remember him. Well, the soldiers next of kin, I understand, have been informed about this. This year has certainly been the bloodiest year of our 8-year involvement in Afghanistan. The vast majority of British casualties have come from roadside bombs, so-called improvised explosive devices described as the Taliban weapon of choice. And so many of the deaths involving our region have come from that very cause. But there was also that very shocking incident last month, of course, when basically a policeman being trained by our soldiers turned the gun on them, and there were 5 tragic deaths to that, one of them with links to Great Yarmouth and to Luton. There's a statement tonight from the Prime Minister. Today we mourn together the 100th British fatality in Afghanistan in 2009. My thoughts, the entire nation's, are with the families and friends of everyone. He ends like this: we will never forget those who died fighting for our country. We must also honour their memory. That means staying the course, doing what is right for Britain, and seeing this mission through.
Kim, thank you very much.
Next tonight, a deal at last for Silverstone after one of the longest-running sagas in British sport finally comes to an end. The Grand Prix is theirs now for 17 years, which means they can build for the future.
And what's good for Silverstone is, of course, good for the motor racing industry in that area and the wider economy. This morning, Jonathan Park was in London when the announcement was made. Tonight, he's in the village of Silverstone.
Yes, hello Stuart. With the obvious exception of Donington, everybody really, from the drivers to the pub landlord in this pub, are delighted with the news that Silverstone has got that 17-year contract to stage the British Grand Prix. The festive celebrations here will be even more good-natured following that news. And I can give you some statistics as well. They reckon at this village pub that they'll be doing 12 weeks trade in just 3 days over the course of the weekend. And in terms of the economy, it's worth £54 million to the British economy, the Formula One Grand Prix. Now, 94% of that actually stays within a 60-mile radius of Silverstone. So today's announcement was big. It was massive news for many people involved in the economy locally. The handshake that showed the world Silverstone was back on the Formula One grid. When Donington broke its contract last month to stage the British Grand Prix, there were fears the race would be lost altogether. But after intense negotiations, common sense has prevailed.
Everyone wants the Grand Prix to happen and everyone wants to have a deal and stuff, but ultimately the deal has to be between two businesses, and the deal has to make sense. And so the Silverstone team have done an absolutely magnificent job in pressing ahead and trying to get the best deal we can so that the Grand Prix can stay in the UK.
Silverstone's managing director Richard Phillips wouldn't say how much it's costing the track, but he did emphasise how important the fans are to the business plan. Last year, 320,000 people watched the Grand Prix weekend at Silverstone, and any less in the years to come would make the economics unworkable.
I can tell you that it was an interesting negotiation, and we've got our work cut out, but it is a doable deal for us.
Formula One's commercial rights holder Bernie Ecclestone was not at the announcement, but he did issue a statement saying he was pleased the race was staying in the calendar, something he'd always wanted. That might not always have seemed the case to these Formula One thoroughbreds, Sir Stirling Moss, Sir Jackie Stewart, Damon Hill and new world champion Jenson Button, all appearing just down the road at the British Racing Drivers Club's awards ceremony.
It's great news, and I can't imagine an F1 season without the British Grand Prix. There's so many people that work in the sport that are British. We have a massive fan base out there, and you only had to look at Silverstone last year to know how many fans we have.
If the drivers were getting excited about taking on Hanger Straight again, the local economists were also purring.
Traditionally, Northamptonshire has been the capital of the shoe world, and now suddenly we have become the centre of where motorsport engineering has evolved to.
Next year will be the 60th anniversary of the circuit's first World Championship race, but now the deal is done, the spirit of Silverstone will live on for at least the next 17 years. Well, this whole business started a couple of years ago when the British Grand Prix was axed by Bernie Ecclestone, and since then it's been a long and winding road to get where we are today. But let's have a chat to the chap whose name is above the door at this pub, the White Horse in Silverstone, Les Adams. Les, how many pints do you reckon you'll be pulling then over the course of that weekend?
Well, hopefully again next year now, at least 45 to 50,000 pints over that weekend.
And the difference between you surviving in his pub, is that what the British Grand Prix means to you?
Basically, it does, in all honesty, particularly with this current economic environment. This news that we got today is the best news we could ever dream of.
I'm told it's packed in this area around the pub here. It's a little village, Silverstone, but everybody prospers, it seems.
Yeah, everybody does all right. Everybody becomes a B&B, so we all benefit from the events, and thank goodness we've got it back again.
Smallish establishment here, but a bigger one up the road is Whittlebury Hall. Let's have a chat to Mark Jones, who is responsible for looking after Whittlebury Hall. Now, that's where the drivers stay, so today's news is obviously a big boost for you as well.
Fantastic news. I mean, we're the host hotel for the teams and most of the drivers, and adjacent to the track, which is the rightful home of the British Grand Prix, so we're absolutely delighted.
A nice kudos to say that you're the hotel where the drivers stay as well.
Oh, it's fantastic. The weekend is electric, and we have a tremendous security operation in place, and it's full of very, very interesting people, totally focused on being the very best in the world.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I'm told it's quiz night here tonight at the pub, and a couple of the questions probably be about the history of Formula One. I wouldn't bet on a day like today. Back to you.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Well, later in the programme, the footballers show their respect for the armed forces, and Richard Daniel at the British Antarctic Survey in Cambridge.
Yes,
Two men have been jailed for helping to steal Cartier jewellery from a warehouse at Southend Airport. The haul included watches and key rings and was worth an estimated £3 million. Another member of the gang later became a trainee chef under Jamie Oliver. Gareth George is at Basildon Ground Court. Gareth.
Well, in 2004, a young man called Tom Baisden decided to turn his life around. He gave up drugs and started to cook. He even joined 15, a training programme run by the celebrity chef Jamie Oliver. But Baisden had a guilty secret, and it was a secret that he needed to get off his chest. He'd been a member of a gang that had stolen jewellery from Southend Airport.
This was the haul, Cartier jewellery worth millions. Back in 2001, police appealed for help to catch the gang who raided a customs warehouse. They suspected a young warehouse worker, but couldn't prove it, until Tom Baisden took part in the TV programme 15 with Jamie Oliver. He became an apprentice chef and decided to make a clean breast of his past. The court heard how Baisden finally went to the police 7 years after the raid. He said he was the inside man on the job. He said he'd helped other men load up the haul, and then they'd tied him up and beaten him up to make it look like a robbery. One of the gang was Baisden's cousin, Gary Morn. This afternoon, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for conspiracy to steal and handling stolen goods. Another man, Joseph Xenophondus, was sentenced to 5 years for conspiracy, although both denied they'd been involved.
And a spokesperson for the 15 Foundation said this: Tom Baisden has shown courage in facing up to his past and coming clean on his involvement in this crime. While we don't condone his original actions, we do think he deserves recognition for taking this brave step and confessing. And they pointed out that the theft took place long before Baisden had any involvement in the 15 Foundation.
Gareth, thank you very much.
The school's adjudicated